Hello, and welcome back to another video on the most iconic moments in Project M history. Today, we're going to venture off the beaten path a little bit. I won't be talking about Paragon Los Angeles, one of the most historic events in PM's history. Instead, we're going to talk about a small regional known as Kings of the North 4, hosted in Wisconsin at the end of 2015. At this event were most of the big Midwest names that you've probably heard of either at the time or since. People like Ripple, Dirt Boy, the usuals. There was also one out-of-region player, Professor Pro. At the time, he was probably a top 3 player in the world. He had just won Tipped Off 11 over Mr. Owls and Junebug, the other contenders for the number 1 title, and had been involved in some of the most iconic moments in PM history. He was the clear first seed at this tournament, and he made it to the winner's side of Grand Finals without dropping a single game. But this wouldn't be an interesting video if that trend continued in Grand, now would it? So let's talk about who's sitting next to him. This is Sothe. In any Smash game, when you think of like the strong regions, even within the Midwest, Iowa is not usually what comes to mind. But Sothe is the exception. He plays Ivysaur, a character that is usually represented in major tournaments by Machiavelli, widely viewed at the time as the best Ivysaur player in the world, and who has a very defined, patient, and methodical playstyle built around using Ivysaur's charged super move, her Solar Beam, in guaranteed simple combos like down throw to beam, dash attack to beam, things like that. It's a very simple game plan that revolves around zoning out your opponent with Ivysaur's long hitboxes, waiting and baiting them out into doing something by playing patiently and waiting for them to approach, and then getting maybe one early kill per game with Solar Beam. For Sothe to even be in Grands is a little bit surprising. He was the 6th seed at this tournament, and for a lot of people outside the Midwest, he was a virtual nobody. He had to beat O'Reilly and then Ripple to get to winners finals, where he got 3-0'd by Professor Pro, and now he's back in Grands. And off the bat, there is a different feeling in this set from what you would expect. Because like I said, traditionally Ivysaur has been this slow, zoning-based character, and Snake has a reputation for being a little bit campy, very tanky and hard to kill, and so if you look at this matchup, you would expect a very slow-paced, methodical set. And instead, Sothe runs at him, over and over and over again. And it works. Sothe has some of the fastest movement that you would ever see from a Floaty, and every time he hits Professor Pro, he's doing insane damage. Just throughout Game 1, Sothe takes the first stock with a combo that ends with Professor Pro at barely 100%. The next 3 stocks are all Solar Beams. He hits 3 back-to-back-to-back Solar Beams in the same game against one of the best players in the world. And it's still close, despite that. Professor Pro is still getting kills with his down B at C4 confirms. He's still edge guarding and he's still a top player. But Sothe's pulling out incredible combos, stock after stock after stock, to keep it even and edge out an advantage. And he takes Game 1. And then Game 2 goes on. And the rest of the set continues, and they go blow for blow. Even the crowd, the Midwest crowd, is not expecting him to be able to hold his own against someone like Professor Pro, who is an established figure, by far the favorite to win, and probably not even drop a game in the process. And instead, Sothe takes Game 1, and then he brings the set to Game 5. And then he resets the bracket.
Bears in.
Oh, the raw
That'll
Solar
do it.
Beam! That's it. Sothe takes a set off of Professor Pro here at Kings of the North 4. We're going to the last set of Grand Finals.
And then, he takes it to another Game 5. And then he wins the tournament. Not with another Solar Beam combo, with the most innocuous move Ivy has, Sour Spot down air. But he does it. And the reason that this set is important is because it sets the stage in 2 major ways for the way that the PM scene is about to develop in 2016. First, as an Ivysaur player, I found it extremely important the way that Sothe approached this game and this set. He was playing Ivy in a way that no one else had ever done before. He had an incredibly refined combo game for a player in 2015. His movement for, again, someone playing a slow, floaty character was all over the place. And he was aggressive. He was running down a snake, and he was making it work. And a lot of people who watched that thought to themselves, maybe the PM meta, which has historically been defined by however the best player for each character plays that character, isn't quite as set as we thought it was. Maybe there's room to play a character like Ivysaur in different ways. Yes, Machiavelli had just made top 8 at Paragon with his playstyle, and now Sothe had gone on to win Kings of the North 4 with a very different playstyle. And it set the stage for a new era of character development and pushing the meta forward in ways that hadn't even been thought of previously, let alone pursued at a top level, because the PM scene as a whole was beginning to realize that we could go way beyond what people had already done. The other thing that's important is that this is one of the best players in the world in Professor Pro, and he's having a knockdown, drag-out set with a player from Iowa that most people had never heard of at this point in time. It's not a blowout. It's not like our last video on Mr. Ellis vs. Hungrybox where he's getting destroyed. But this is one of the best PM-specific players who's been playing at the top of the game for years now. And he's getting pushed to his absolute limit, and in some cases beyond that, by someone that no one would have expected to come out of the woodworks and challenge him at a relatively small tournament that I think everyone expected him to win. And that really did set the stage for 2016. This is one of the last big tournaments of 2015. We feel like we're kind of seeing the meta settle a little bit, and then boom. Sothe is here with his aggressive, combo-oriented playstyle, and he's beating Professor Pro. And I think, for me, that was a really iconic moment because it showed that even for the people who played PM and practiced the game, even Professor Pro could still get caught off guard. New players were still on the come up, they were still grinding, and it was a good way to see that no matter what region you were from or how well known you were, this was a game where you could stand up to the best players in the world and you could beat them if you knew your stuff. And that set the tone going into 2016 where all of a sudden every player, all the best players from all these regions that people had never heard of, suddenly realized, oh, I could do that. I could beat Professor Pro, or Junebug, or Mr. Elves. That's, in a nutshell, what led to the incredible events of 2016, which we'll start on in our next video.